Hello, everybody. How are you all doing today? My name is Sami. I'm the CEO of CertiCraft. We're on a mission to help craft cannabis producers transition into and thrive within the regulated market here in Canada. We do that primarily through a compliance platform that makes staying on top of all those crazy reporting requirements and record-keeping requirements super, super easy for licensed producers. And this is the State of Craft. It's a series where we just have discussions on the state of the legal craft cannabis industry. What's going well, what's not going well, and what can we do to make things better. And today I am really excited. Oh, wait, sorry. Before I introduce our guests, a few housekeeping items. We got a chat on the side there where you can say hi or comment on anything that you're hearing throughout this conversation. And if you have any questions for anybody who's here today, we have a dedicated questions tab. Please go ask questions there. You can upvote questions that you like, and at the end, we'll go through the questions in order of popularity until we either run out of time or run out of questions. Okay, now with that out of the way, I'd love to introduce our guests here today. I'm really excited to have a group of really kick-ass processors here with me today. We got Kip and Abyan from Shelter and Ben from Joint Ventures Craft Cannabis. And these fine folks are working to make a really viable path to market for craft cannabis producers. That's what they focus on. And I'll stop talking now and let each of them introduce themselves. Anybody feel like they want to go first?
Kip does.
Kip, great. We'll start with Shelter. Let's go Kip and Abyan, and then we'll switch over to Ben with Joint Venture.
Hey, Sammy, I'm having a problem hearing you a little bit.
Oh, you're having problems?
Yeah, it's really tinny again.
It's really tinny. Okay. Is there any chance you have headphones or something?
No, I don't, but it cleared up last time. Just give me a second here.
Okay. Well, Kip and Abyan are going to introduce themselves, and then we'll switch over to you, Ben, okay?
Yeah.
Thanks for backing that bus over me, Abyan. Really kind of you. So, yes, hi, my name is Kip Rowe. I'm the director of cannabis at Shelter. We are our licensed production facility is based in Mackland. It goes under the Agro Greens name. We help. One of the main things we try to do is to try to get micro and small craft cannabis through the supply chain nationally. And we've been at this now for almost 2 years, and so we have fallen into every trap possible, and we've created a few of our own. But we're getting things on track, and we think that we're trying to help. We know we're helping. The small guy try to get his product to market, and we're here for it all day.
Great. And Kip, do you want to maybe say a sentence or two about who you are personally as opposed to just Shelter?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no problem. I'm director of cannabis. I've been in the cannabis market, in the traditional market and the legal markets now for, on and off for 30 years. Not much I haven't done. I've, ran an international seed company. I've owned storefront shop in Vancouver. Was a grower for years. Kind of anything and everything in my adult life has been around this wonderful plant.
Cool. Thanks, Kip. Abyan, how about yourself?
Hey, my name is Abyan Schupp. Grew up on the Sunshine Coast, small town in Roberts Creek. So
I love Roberts Creek, and that's fun times there.
So many people know what that means when I say that. So
what's the name of that campground just up the hill from Roberts Creek where they have really fun parties all the time?
Up the hill from Roberts Creek. Well, there's the horse camp. That's where we used to party when we were kids.
Yeah.
And there's the Roberts Creek campground, and then there's Porpoise Bay towards Seashell. Though you're thinking of?
No, none of those. I'll figure it out, and I'll say it at some point in this conversation. Be like, oh, that's the place. Sorry to interrupt. I just got excited. Spent a lot of time there.
The main thing everyone knows about the creek is the gumboot. That's the famous thing. And we refer to our soup as gumbooters. I don't even know why that started because it rains a lot and we're gumboots or bros out in the mud tending the plants. I don't know. Anyways, but so small hippie community. So I've been around cannabis my entire life. Elementary school, I had to clean up my math books because my dad was rolling joints on them so I could go to school. That's just how I grew up. Weed drying in the kitchen, just always been around it, which is ironic because I've only been in the cannabis industry since I started with Shelter 4 years ago. So I've lots of experience of cannabis as a consumer and helping my friends get it and just working with my dad, but never actually dove headfirst into the industry. Just always been kind of in sales around skateboarding and snowboarding. And then when I came back from overseas, the gray market had just exploded. And all of a sudden I had so many friends and acquaintances that were in the industry. So I was just clicked all of a sudden. I was like, what have I been doing for the last 30 years? How have I not been diving into cannabis? I've sold products. I love cannabis. I consume it every day. and I just dove in head first. And I met the team at Shelter. They brought me on to work in the warehouse. At the time, we were running a mom site. And from there, it just went up and went up and up and up. And legalization happened in October, and we stayed on in the gray side as long as we could and made the jump over. And from there, it's just kind of skyrocketed. And I stepped into the role of national sales director, meaning that I manage all the accounts across Canada for all the provincial boards, as well as the sales team.
Cool. Awesome. Ben, what about yourself? You want to tell us about joint venture craft cannabis?
Yeah, man. My son's back working. Ben Williams, joint venture craft cannabis CEO, located here in Salmon Arm, British Columbia, right in the middle of the province. Personally, decades in the old school legacy market in a number of different capacities. And when legalization was coming in, I decided that I was such a shitty grower that rather than get involved in doing my own micro, I would start a business that would help my buddies get to market instead of me, because I knew I could never compete, and that's the truth. So, I'm
glad you're honest, man. I'm glad you're honest.
Yeah, man. And some of the gear that I've seen since doing this would just blows your socks off. So I'm happy with that decision. And so, yeah, anyways, taking a little bit of previous business acumen and experience into essentially, and as an experiment at first, getting my buddies to market. First of all, helping with some sort of compliance services and paperwork, helping these micro applications through Health Canada, and then, getting my own license first as a micro processor, then getting our sales amendment, then scaling it up to standard and moving on. And so we're very, very small. We're very much in the shadow of larger, more furred out companies like Shelter, but because they have a sort of a similar model, they're sort of, we sort of look up to them. They talk to guys like Kip and Abyan, and they're quite a bit more farther down the line than us, but we do share a very similar passion for getting craft to market, and it's sort of a similar business model in that respect. And by and large, man, just like really wanting the small guy craft grower to inherit this market eventually, despite having as many challenges as there are, and we're all figuring them out on a day-to-day. But I'm personally offended at large Johnny-come-lately LPs with massive warehouses and airplane hangars trying to take this out of the hands of people that I know that have been doing this for 20, 30 years and feeding their kids that way and paying their mortgage that way. So we don't dig that. We're here for the little guy, the mom and pops, and we're trying to work as a team to figure out how to be successful in the market. Amazing.
And Ben, quick clarification question for you. I know you guys started as a micro. Have you already finished the transition to standard, or is that still in the works? No. Yeah, we are standard currently. So we went prioritized it as achieving the micro license first. And then we got the sales amendment. We currently only do dried cannabis, so just whole flower and pre-roll SKUs currently. And then I think we got our standard 5 or 6 months ago or something. Cool. Congrats. I'm glad you get to move a lot more product through your facility now, which will mean that many more people get to come online from the craft cannabis space. Yeah, man. Cool. So let's get into this discussion here. So yeah, like this series always goes, we always start off by asking, what's going well in this industry? Cannabis has been legalized for 3 years, and I'm curious if any of you guys have something that comes to mind as what's going really well for the craft cannabis industry, if anything at all, in the legal world specifically.
Well, yeah, there's craft flower in the market legally. I mean, that's a bloody win. Yeah. Because 2 years ago we couldn't say that. 2 years ago it was all large LP hay and literally grass. Yeah. And now we've got the smaller guys in there, thanks to Ben and companies like Ben's, that are really kind of advocating for the smaller grower, because we're showing the new customer, the old customer, the legacy customer, that in the legal market, small growers have a place. They can grow fantastic flower and actually get it into a store, pay their taxes, be a good public citizen. And it's an amazing thing. I mean, you go into stores now and you see a little craft farmer that you knew used to buy bags from back in the day, and it's outstanding. So that's a really good part of this, and you know, people being allowed to have their own businesses and what they love to do, and actually feed their families and their friends. This is an amazing thing.
And to not need to hide in any kind of way while doing all that.
Yeah. The first like 8 months for us, like I'm still confused about every day that happens in this industry, to be completely honest. But the first 8 months was just, I was like, this is a completely different job now. This is a different industry. It's a different product. Like, this is like, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. Like, what am I selling? Tobacco? Like, it was so confusing. And now it kind of feels like how it used to feel when we were back in the illicit market. Like, we're working with like-minded individuals. We're getting products finally that are quite similar to what we used to get. So it's like, it feels like we're really made a huge transition in the last 10 months to what this industry used to feel like. And having these people that have been in legacies of years of growing such a fantastic product now are actually able to communicate with again and work with again. It's quite nice.
And is that transition that you're feeling, Abyan, is that something that you'd say is mostly a result of changes with the various provincial distribution boards, or where has the change taken place that has allowed this feeling and to come back?
There has been some changes with the provincial boards to allow these smaller people to get to market, to allow these craft growers and micros get to market. There has, across the country, the boards are putting an initiative in to get things going, but just the licensing from Health Canada, there was very few micros when we started this. There was only a handful of them, and at the time there was, I think, one, or I think we might have been the first actually to bring one to market. We were the first company to bring a micro to market in Canada.
Was that with NoSAR or something different?
No, that was North 40 in
Gord.
February 2020, I think. So there was a couple other micro licenses before that one, but Gord's was the first product to actually land in Canada that was produced under a micro cultivation license. So that was exciting to see for sure when that all happened. But there wasn't product when we started the first little while. It was, you know, we were looking at the big guys and we were trying to figure out where we were standing. At that point, we were cultivating up in Macklin, Saskatchewan. So we were still just working that out and deciding what we were doing. And like then we decided, well, I can't speak for Kip. Actually, Kip is actually a great grower. But the facility we had at the time, we had realized that we don't need to cultivate. So we started looking outward and finding other people's stuff. And that's when the real initiative went to kind of finding other micro flower here. So yes, provincial boards have made an initiative to make it more accessible for everyone, but just the licenses being able to be given to micros to actually see flower come through, which has been really exciting.
Yeah, I would add a little to that too. Like in my experience, I don't know if the boys at Shelter find this, but like lately, like our whole premise is not hiding from your legacy roots, but it's showing that and being honest and upfront and being proud of that background and bringing that experience into the legal supply chain. And so when we talk about listing SKUs for craft growers to the various provincial boards, whether it's BC or Ontario or whomever, we're very upfront about it. And they know, like, they want that. They want the legacy guys transitioned over for obviously, you know, a ton of reasons, including eliminating their number one competition, having these guys, you know, contribute to the tax base and some following up on what Abyan was saying, lots of good reasons for that. And so, you know, when we unabashedly and unapologetically introduce these SKUs and these craft growers as from having legacy roots, I found it's been really well received in pretty much every province that we've talked to. They want that. The regulatory system, and of course it varies from province to province, isn't necessarily set up for having, you know, hundreds and hundreds of every single craft grower and multiple strains and everything else. But I have seen support from provincial boards that when you tell them about legacy, they go, okay, like, yeah, we want these guys in the market. So I found it helpful.
I'm curious about that, Ben, because I would have imagined that government would be kind of uncomfortable with the idea of somebody publicly saying, hey, I used to be technically a criminal. And, you know, because that's ultimately like what somebody who has legacy roots is. And I no comment, like, I don't think that should have been ever the case, but it was in the legal system that we have here. So you're saying that the governments that you're working with, to them, they actually like that somebody would have that kind of branding, because people they associate that with quality compared to what, let's say, the big LPs that were growing hay and grass, like Abyan and Kip were saying earlier. So that's interesting to me. I never would have thought that governments would be like, yeah, no, that's great. Say that it's legal.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think when I get your point, but I think when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, from a consumer standpoint, like Abyan was saying, we're seeing more and more good quality craft flower make it to market, just like the old days. So from a consumer standpoint, we're talking about increased quality, great potencies, great terpene profiles, nice chunky rare genetics that they don't have from some of these big LP places. It makes a lot of sense. Plus, the consumer experience is based on, like, particularly in the whole flower market, as far as I'm concerned, like having a variety to choose from. So rather than having like 20,000 kilos of fucking purple kush, we got a variety of like other things that are like, the guy can pick an eighth of this and an eighth of that and go home and have a couple different experiences. So I think like small batch craft from a consumer standpoint makes a lot of sense from legacy craft. And then from the government, it's just like, the whole thing from a high level perspective in the beginning was to tax it. And so obviously, if they can make their excise and their sales tax and their payroll tax and their corporate income tax and everything else off this, they're going to want as many of these cannabis businesses in the pipe as they can get, so to speak. And so I think it makes a lot of sense on every level.
Yeah, cool.
To reiterate on that point there, Ben, like, you and your team really paved the way for shouting from the rooftops about our roots. We were terrified for the first year until we really met you guys to say where we were from. Like, I wouldn't go to the BCLVB and be like, hey, this is actually a legacy brand, or hey, we actually transitioned over. I was so quiet until I met you guys. And you're like, say it, shout it. Who cares? What are they going to do? And now when I talk to the provincial boards, I constantly tell them, like, hey, this brand, we brought this over from the legacy side. Hey, this grower, they were in the illicit market, and now they're here. And you're right, they love it. It's a huge selling feature now with the provincial boards to tell them that this was transitioned over and there actually is legs here. This brand, this product, this grower was supported in the previous market, and there is customers already for it.
But it's also a kind of double-edged sword, because you have Health Canada on the other side with their security clearances, and if you're open about that there, good luck getting that security clearance, So it's kind of like, once you get to the point that you have your license, it sounds like at that point you can be open about it. But until you get there, you really got to be hush hush. Like, I know a lot of people who've really struggled getting their security clearances. And for anybody watching this right now, we had a previous CertiCraft with John Conroy and Jack Lloyd where they really got into the legality and the actually illegality of the way the current security clearance system works. It goes completely against Canadian law. And if somebody were to take that whole system to Health Canada, I guess, with a lawsuit or whoever is in charge of security clearances, there'd be a great chance that whole system would be reformed completely, because it goes completely against the law right now. Anyway, done with that tangent. So it's just weird to me to hear that, like, there's all these different levels of government that have just like such a different relationship with the transparency and openness about your past.
Yeah.
Surprising.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, like you say, there's sort of different stages to all this in terms of exposing oneself, I suppose. But at the end of the day, like, I've seen provincial boards that are mandated to bring micro and craft stuff in. Like,
yeah,
well, they gotta justify the vig they're taking. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? Like, they've got to justify this ridiculous taxation setup. The provincial vig that each province takes, they've got to justify it, and so by justifying it is letting the legacy guys, I love that word I just used myself. I'm shaking my head already. Allowing us to be a part of this system, that's their justification. So that's why the money talks, right?
Which is just funny, considering that, like, if it wasn't for the legacy, it's legacy growers that fought to legalize cannabis. Like, there's so many activists in this world that came from the legacy market, fought to legalize this plant. Now it's legalized, but guess what? The regulations are made in a way that we're keeping you out of the market and are making it way too hard for you to transition, even though this is what you fought for decades to realize.
I actually like to use the word traditional market instead of legacy myself, to be honest, because that was just the market it was.
Yeah.
This legacy and this and that. Legacy to me is what, the guys from the 70s? I mean, I don't know.
What about pre-legal? That's a
pre-legal. There you go. I like that one. Pre-legal.
So Kip, you started talking about some of the challenges. You know, you mentioned like the ridiculous taxation system and whatnot. So I feel like this is maybe a good point to transition into what's not going so well, like in these first few years, and maybe let's just focus on like the past like year or two, because I know earlier on there was like a lot of bullshit that has been addressed in various ways. So in this past year, what would you say are things that are still like really challenging for legal craft from the perspectives of your facilities and what you guys do on a daily basis?
Taxation, first and foremost, to be quite frank. I mean, the excise tax it kills everyone's margin. I mean, there are instances where if you add up all the taxes, the government's making more than the bloody grower. I mean, that's insane. That is not a sustainable industry. Things need to change. The fact that, this federal excise, I mean, it takes an act of parliament to get that changed. I mean, that's insane. I mean, you can't get these asshats to agree on what color that wall is that they're all staring at, right? So how is this going to change anytime soon? So it's on us really to try to craft, workarounds to make straighter lines, to be as loud as we can, to be as supportive in this whole industry. A high tide raises all boats, and that's why you've got two different processors sitting right here that are competing for the same market, that help each other out as much as we possibly can, because it's not competition, and we're competing against the man. We're not competing against each other.
So maybe for people in the audience who maybe aren't as familiar with the reality of duties and taxes that exist in the cannabis world, can one of you guys give us a breakdown of what taxes there actually are, what markups there are? Because the BCLDB doesn't call their tax a tax; they call it a markup. Like, how does that break down? What are the realities that you guys face in that regard?
I guess you guys are looking at me for this one, aren't
you? Oh, I've been telling you, buddy.
Go ahead.
So without giving too much away, because some of this information is private to the provincial governments, but everyone understands the federal excise, federal and provincial excise. So it's $1 per gram across the country. That will be divided up between federal and provincial in different ways. Outside of that, there's also a provincial adjustment, which is up to the provinces to do. So for instance, BC does not do a provincial adjustment. However, they do a markup for their distribution center. So
what is a provincial adjustment? This is the first time I've heard that word.
A provincial adjustment is the option for the province to add an additional percentage into the excise tax, which is considered a tax essentially. Okay. So for instance, Saskatchewan doesn't do distribution. So you sell directly to a retail store as a producer there, or to a distribution company. So because the province of Saskatchewan is still getting their excise, or 75 cents per gram provincial excise there, they're also putting on an additional 6.45% provincial adjustment to help in with any admin fees or reporting they have to do, or admin fees.
I mean, there's a lot of admin when you completely remove yourself from the supply chain, and it's you go directly from producer to retail. There's lots of admin involved with that.
Filling out paperwork is really hard, Sammy. Okay, really hard. And then reporting, handing out licenses to retailers, vetting people. There's all those things that they kind of bundle in there. They've accumulated.
Okay, I see. Okay,
6.45%.
I take back some of my sarcasm.
Please, your sarcasm is definitely able to be used here. Ontario, they do a provincial adjustment as well. They do a 3.9% provincial adjustment on top of the $1 per gram excise as well. And then, for instance, Alberta, they actually don't do, which is a really interesting model if you compare Alberta and BC and even Ontario. Alberta doesn't actually do a distribution markup. So what you sell, like as a producer, what you sell to the AGLC in Alberta for is the same price that the retailers pay. However, they do a very large provincial adjustment. Like it's 16.8% provincial adjustment on top of your $1 per gram. So you're paying a lot of tax there in Alberta, but now the retailers don't pay that markup. So if I sell a 3.5 gram SKU for $25 to the AGLC, the retailer buys that from the AGLC for $25.
So that is that essentially the difference between BC and Alberta? That BC, the 15% is a markup on what you're doing, and in Alberta, they're just charging you that as a tax?
They charge 60% back to the producer, where BC puts that 15% on after they pay the producer and charge that to the retailer. So that's the difference. So it's harder for us producers to sell to Alberta, but it's a bit easier for retailers because then they're buying it for a lower amount, but it kind of just evens itself out in the wash, essentially.
Yeah.
No, there's also other fees there with marketing.
Okay, so we have excise duty, we have provincial fees, whether they're markups or taxes or adjustments or whatever you want to call them. Is there anything else from a taxation and duty perspective that that enters the mix, or is that about it as far as the main culprits that are making it really hard to meet reasonable profit margins?
Those are the main culprits there. The federal provincial excise, the provincial markup. There's the ad valorem, which doesn't really exist. I don't think anyone's ever actually hit the ad valorem here in Canada, which is I know Dan talked about it on the last podcast you had there, but if you sell at wholesale over $10 a gram, the ad valorem comes in at 10% base it or whatever is cheaper. So $1 per gram, everyone knows that one. So then, for instance, like some of the larger provinces here in Canada, they do a provincial adjustment as well as a markup. So there's also that option as well too. And then for different categories, sometimes there's a couple of the boards that will do a different markup percentage for different categories, and sometimes even different SKUs. So those are the ones that are really hard.
Listen, I mean, excise alone represents between 24 to 30% of top line revenues. Markups in addition to that. So the struggle for producers to break even is insanely difficult.
Yeah. And I think this is the stuff that, like, a craft grower who is just a cultivator who does not do processing, you know, when they try to sell product to a processor and the prices they're offered is like, you know, half or a third of what they were expecting. This is probably the piece that's missing that they don't realize that processors are going through. Like I was really introduced to this when we talked with Dan Sutton from Tantalus Labs a few times ago that you referenced, Abyan, there. Like that was my introduction to like just how fucked the world of excise duties really is. And since then it's just been left, right, and center. I mean, the whole Stand for Craft movement that Dan kind of launched, that came out of that State of Craft episode. He was like, you know what, we're gonna like do this coming out of this. This is fucked. We need to like have a campaign. And I'm sure there were like, you know, that there were stirrings of that going on before that episode. But yeah, it's crazy. Just the 30% of your top line revenue is coming out.
So the result of that that Abyan explained really effectively is that your margin is so eroded with tax that by the time you get it to the craft grower and they get their actual cannabis revenue out of that after it's packaged and excised and the logistics and everything else, it trims it down so far. And then when you have the price compression that's gone on in the last 6 to 9 months or whatever, it really squashes their sort of revenue expectations as craft growers. And it's heartbreaking because these are all like, I mean, my favorite thing about my job is the people that I get to meet. They're really good folks, husband and wife teams, mom and pop setups. And as you guys know, these legal built out grow ops, micro cultivation facilities cost a fortune to do. They take forever to get licensed. These people are putting their net worth, their home equities and stuff on the line to build this out and to buy into this legal supply chain and be part of the thing. And then with all these other hands in their pockets, their revenue expectations are way below what they got into it expecting, and that's heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. I agree with Kip, like that needs to change. I don't know how quickly or effectively that's ever going to get done. In the meantime, we try to deal with what we're dealt and try to find, effective ways to get guys to market and sustainably. But yeah, that's the heartbreaking part, dude, is like, there's so many hands in the pocket that these people that make the jump and they buy into it and they, put everything they've made into like this transition, and then they get there and it's like,
Ben, how many guys do you talk to in a given week that you're basically playing Grim Reaper? Like you're basically taking their entire dream and shoving it down the toilet. Because, it's false expectations. It's heartbreaking. Like I'm stressed out at the end of my days sometimes. Like I can't smile. I'm just like, well, I've just destroyed 3 people's lives today. It was so much fun. Yeah. Because there's just no margin left. And I mean, and here's the other thing too, is that, I mean, these guys have to come into this market now knowing that the cards are against them, right? The deck is stacked. And so in order to be able to be successful in this industry, your all in per gram cost has got to be a realized $1.50-ish or less. If it's costing you over $2 to make a gram of grass, you're in for a lot of pain. And I say this now only because this is the reality of where we're all living at this point in the game. And I want people to understand that these are the benchmarks you need to hit, and have a forum like this to be able to discuss it. So maybe I don't have to have Ben and I don't have to break people's hearts on a given bloody week. So I mean, if the government's not going to change, if the provincial boards aren't going to change their system, it's on us then to change it, to make it to work for us for right now anyways. And that is getting your all-in costs like so in realistic versions of in that price range of $1.50, $1.75, and realizing that the days of getting $4, $5, $6 a gram are gone and not coming back ever. Don't let any consultant or the zeitgeist of two growers talking to each other in a hallway, don't listen to that crap anymore, because this is the reality.
So this is the reality right now. It's a reality that we all agree is fucked, and it's one that we need to change. One avenue, the only realistic one at this moment right now is what you were talking about there, Kip, which is, you have to get your costs down below the $2, $1.50 a gram level in order to make this realistic, to be able to actually have a profit. From the flip side perspective, you mentioned how in order to change the excise duty, that has to take an act of parliament, I think is what you said. Like, how do you see, any of you guys, us shifting this reality so that there isn't that huge price compression, there isn't all those hands taking what it sounds like is ultimately 40-50% of the revenue out of what would otherwise allow a profit to exist? What do you see as like viable paths forward to actually get the government, whether it's provincial or federal, to change the policies that exist today?
Unified trade association with teeth. I mean, paid lobbyists. I mean, play their game. What else can we do?
It's just weird to me, because it's like, how is it not obvious that if we keep going down the path we're going right now, that all these people who had visions and dreams and hopes and wanted to legitimize what they're doing, come to this legal world, transition the entire market over to this world, and there are like I know in the Kootenays, around where I live here, there was a study done, it might have been by Community Features, I forget who exactly. There's about 3,000 growers within the central Kootenays. 2,500 of them have an ACMPR license. 2,000 of those people wanted to transition. 2,000. Right now, 3 years later, there's only like 30 to 40 licenses in this local area. All these people still want to transition, but they just see how fucked it is, and they're not going to do it. If you keep making it this hard, you're gonna have you're gonna get maybe 40% of the pie, but the pie is gonna be tiny. Make it like 10% of the pie, 5% of the pie. The pie is gonna be huge. Your slice is gonna dwarf the entire pie that exists today, and I just don't understand how that's not obvious to the government people, the government folks.
A lot of backdoor stuff going on that none of us are privy to be completely honest.
Yeah.
So we don't fully understand a lot of things going on there, and we're trying our best to get in there and learn and fight for the little guys and understand how to bring these products to markets as we're doing. But like Kip said, we just got to beat them at their own game. We have to just start playing the way that they play and start doing things that we aren't, we didn't learn. We're not business people from big tobacco or alcohol. We're cannabis people. So we've done our entire life. So now we're trying to understand this industry that they're basing it off of, which is big tobacco and alcohol. And we don't know. Like, there's a lot of people in this industry that came from there, but like us, the ones bringing the micros and the craft people to market, we didn't come from there. We came from cannabis. So trying to understand how to work with, public sector is quite difficult. So we're trying different angles, different techniques. I'm talking to people out east, to BC, to in the middle, and getting different ideas, and then telling them what they said and what you said, and just trying to understand what we can do to make things better. But at the end of the day, it's the government, man.
I think too, like, even though, solving the overall taxation problem is a pretty big picture, long-term issue that needs to be tackled. In the meantime, there's a ton of other restrictions that add on to the struggle. Like, for example, marketing restrictions or labeling restrictions on the products and stuff, like when you compare to the US market, and like how limited we are in terms of like branding elements. And like, because if we're here to let the country know that we are Joe Blow craft grower from Salmo, then like we got to be able to like advertise that and put it somewhere on the package and stuff. And I know like I know guys have made strides with that recently, like within the bounds, but I think that's incredibly restricting. But I also think the big one that's going to help small batch craft guys be successful is like the SKU registration process obviously varies from province to province. And some of them are really long and protracted. And like Ontario is just like a mystery to me, like, because we're projecting out months and months and months. And so you're talking to Joe Blow craft grower again, and he's like, he's doing 10, 20 kgs a month or whatever it is. Like, how does he know what he's going to be ready to ship in like April or May? You know what I mean? Because there's just too much there. So I don't actually fully understand OCS's flow through model completely. I get the gist of it. I think that will help. I also think it's sort of similar to like BC's going direct to retail next year. I think that is going to be a huge deal, because then there's no gatekeeping in terms of like getting your SKU to market. Like, the onus is on us, the processors and the growers, to like say, hey, like, if we're proud of our product, if we know this is good quality stuff, we're going to get out there and have the relationships with the retailers, create demand at a consumer and retail level. And then they're going to then order direct, or in the flow through model in Ontario, what have you. And we kind of like take the handcuffs off in terms of creating our own demand, rather than like hoping the province cuts us a PO. You know what I mean? I'd rather be in control of my own destiny than waiting around for the province to email me. So I think that'll help.
Yeah. Waiting around every Friday to see if your inbox has a message is an amazing thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that when they approve or deny a SKU every Friday?
Well, it varies, dude. Like province to province. I mean, every province, as Kip and Abyan very well know, is like completely different. You've got Saskatchewan, that's like the Wild West, where it's essentially direct, but it's managed mostly by a couple different wholesalers. You got Manitoba, that's got this like oddball hybrid system, but it kind of works well. And then you got the larger provinces like BC, Alberta, Ontario, that are like warehousing and stuff. But like I said, like I think we were talking like before we went on there, like if you ship a handful of cases and they sell out day one, like if they sell out in 6 minutes, then you might not get another delivery appointment or replenishment PO for weeks, which like curtails everybody's cash flow. It breaks your momentum in terms of your consumer awareness and everything. And so like those sorts of things, and it's not anybody's fault. It's just the regulatory system like that is super constricting and restricting. And I think once we get the power to be the master of our own domain and go directly to retail, and I'm looking out my window, there's a dispensary across the street. Like, it's insane to me that like it's got to go all the way down to Richmond and then this circuitous route back up. I can just walk across the street and go, here you go. That's going to be a life-changing thing for craft guys that want to get out there and pound the pavement and promote themselves and compete with these big guys, because people do care about small business and craft, but we need to be able to share that and really get direct to retail and consumers, I think.
And I've been really excited in the conversations that I've had with the BC government, because I really get the sense that they recognize the challenges and the issues that cause people to struggle, especially on the craft side. And I really get the feeling that they are trying to do their best to rectify those issues, and to create a good system that will actually address these challenges. And I hope to God, like I've been pushing really hard for the BC LDP to actually just run a pilot project with their direct delivery model that they're putting out there. They've had this attitude of, no, we don't need a pilot, because it's going to work just fine, no matter if it's 5 people or 1,000 people. But I realized recently they're talking about the technical side of it, about like the actual software system working, not about testing out all the assumptions that they've made with the policies they have in place. So that's going to be my big mission over the next few months, to just like keep pounding the pavement and keep knocking on their door to just do a trial with all the micros in BC. Do a trial with all the micros in BC. Just do a trial with all the micros in BC.
They're still really working out the kinks of how to do the reporting on the side of things. And I understand where they're coming from on that. But yeah, like a trial system wouldn't make sense. Just kind of understand how it works. However, in past experience, trial programs have been not in our favor. They were told to be in our favor. Well, the flow-through model, for instance, that was supposed to be, to help us out in Ontario. I can't speak too much about how the actual model works because I'm not locked into an NDA or anything like that. I just don't know because none of us actually know how the flow-through model in Ontario is supposed to work because it's changed so many times. But the idea was to be able to work with craft and small growers to get products to flow through the warehouse. And it completely changed after like 4 or 5 months of it kind of coming to life and going through different ideas and conversations and listings. And then it just went to something that was, they chose Canopy to be the initial spearhead for the flow-through model trial. So it's like,
but that to me is not a matter of trials being bad. That's just sounds like bribery, to be honest. Because if they had a flow-through model that's supposed to be for craft, and then you take one of the literally biggest, like 3 or 4 producers in Canada as the trial for a thing for craft producers, that's a high up decision that's total bullshit, to just put it quite frankly. I hadn't heard about this until this moment here. I don't think that's anything wrong with trials necessarily, so much as I've said my piece there. Sorry,
I don't know.
Before we continued, we are a few minutes away from the end of the discussion. I guess I'll just check in with you guys. This is going great. Are you guys down to just talk longer, or do you have a hard stop?
I'm all good.
It's Friday. Right, the Raptor game doesn't come on for about 5 hours. So
great. Well, we might keep going then. But I know there's like maybe 30 of you that joined after the beginning. Amazing to almost be at 60 people in the audience here right now. If you have any questions for anybody here, please ask it in the questions tab. You can upvote questions that you like. We'll go through the questions whenever we dwindle this discussion here in order of most upvoted. So go see what's been asked and upvote things you like. For those of you who joined later on, as soon as we finish this thing, within a minute or so, the podcast will restart from the beginning, so you can see the beginning of this thing. And one of you guys mentioned the thing about having CertiCraft. I think it was Nathan. You mentioned having CertiCraft have a calculator for different excise duty in different provinces. We're working on that. We have a processing module that just released the first version of. Version 2 or 3 will have that calculator that you requested. Okay, so with that aside, what else do you guys think can be done to address kind of the various challenges you've been struggling with this past year?
One thing that I really like that's been done in the BC LDB recently is they've allowed us to, for products that are from a BC micro license, and you have to prove to them to show that it's actually a BC micro license from giving them the actual licensing name, allows us to work directly with the wholesale manager rather than the BC cannabis category managers to start. So therefore, we can take a product.
And sorry, explain to all of us here, what is a wholesale manager and what is the BC cannabis category manager? What do those two terms mean?
So because BC has the BC cannabis stores, e-commerce and brick and mortar, one of the few provinces that has both varieties there, they have category managers that buy for the BC cannabis store. So they look at data and sales report and what products are needed for the BC cannabis store. And then there's a wholesale side of it that buys products for the wholesale channel, so private retail. Mm-hmm. So generally the way the system has worked up until recently is you go through the BC cannabis store category managers. They say yes or no if they want to pick up your SKU. And if it's a yes, you go through registration. If it's a no, then that gets classified as a decline and gets pushed over to the wholesale manager. And then the wholesale manager will look at it and say, oh, this product's actually great for private retail stores. Doesn't make sense for BC cannabis store, but works great for private retail. So that system really just kind of bogged down everything. The BC cannabis stores have a bi-weekly meeting, and it just took a lot longer to get things going. So, and also you're dealing with, there are 29 or 30 BC cannabis stores now in BC when there's over 300 private retailers. So it was a little bit backwards to start with the smaller amount of stores, more private retailer. So now if you have a BC micro license, you can go direct to wholesale, and the turnaround time is way faster. You can get it done in like 2-3 days. So
amazing. And so if you guys as Shelter, who are technically based out of Saskatchewan and are a processor, you can still use that as long as the product you're bringing to market is a BC cultivator, is a micro cultivator. Is that
exactly
correct?
so? Like Kootenai's Finest, they have their license to Send Farms. They are grown in BC, and they can prove that on their license. We show that to the BC LDB. They say, great, this is a BC micro. You can go through this system, and we go straight to wholesale. If the product is good in wholesale, though, BC Cannabis Store picks it up immediately.
Yeah. And I do believe that Kevin from Kootenai's Finest is on this call here today. I've seen a few of your customers that you guys work with, your producers rather. I know Kootenai Aeroponics is here as well. I think they work with you, Ben.
Yeah, you bet.
I think I've seen one or two others, but I can't remember at this point who they are.
I can only imagine who JD is.
That's hilarious.
Kip, anything you want to add to what you think either has changed recently that's really great, or that you think can change and is realistic to change?
I mean, quite frankly, the chasm between producers and bud tenders. I mean, so I think we've just talked about it, the chasm, and what fills that chasm up is the information flow. It's being bottlenecked by an arbitrary government that lets us, tells us what's going to go into the market and what's not. To me, that's the craziest thing ever. Like, who made them subject matter experts, to be quite frank? I understand they've all got jobs and they're doing their jobs, and some of them are doing them really well and have amazing intentions. But just that whole model is crazy to me. Do they have 30 years in the business? Do they know what a good flower is? Do they know what people want to puff down? Do they understand flavor class profiles? Do they understand any of this? I mean, they're just basing their selections based on datas and COAs that are inflating how the market trends, like high THC COAs, which we know is garbage. Now that is changing a little bit. We're getting terpene, more terps talk going into the market now. But we need to be able to go right to retailers. The producers and processors and vendors need to go right to retailers to start developing their own following, to have that communication, to give real information to bud tenders, and like to be able to give out samples. I mean, at 10 in the morning, I can go to my liquor store and get a sample of a Merlot and chug it right down and jump in my car and rock on. I mean, I don't understand how this in cannabis, we can't even give bud tenders free samples. I mean, how are they supposed to talk about our products? From a sell sheet? I mean, that just seems nuts to me. So
I mean, I think it's even crazier than that, because it's not just the bud tenders. Like, a producer at their own facility is legally not allowed to sample their own product. What? How?
Yeah, I mean, there's just a bunch of really backward stuff that needs to change in order to get this whole industry down the road. And I'm talking not just craft, but just the industry in general. I mean, these arbitrary rules were set up by people that had no idea what the actual traditional market entailed. And that's ultimately your biggest issue right there.
So I got one follow-up question, Kip, there. You touched on how things are starting to shift in terms of retail with more understanding of terpene profiles and all these other aspects of the cannabis flower that's not just THC. Do you ever think that we'll get to a point where this, 20% or more THC, or we're not going to carry it attitude is going to shift?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to. Otherwise, I'm going to leave the business. I mean, because to me, that's just it's a garbage number. I mean, when I shop for cannabis, I shop for taste, flavor, experience. I don't just shop for what's going to lay me out on the floor the fastest. So yes, it is going to change. But again, it has to be a combination of our provincial partners and the industry to make those changes and make them so that we can describe more of these things. So we can give more education to the bud tenders and ultimately to the consumers. So I do believe it will change. And having, like Ben was saying, having some of the marketing restrictions lifted right there will let us communicate our story more so that people have a better understanding of what they're purchasing and the options available to them.
Ben, what about yourself? Is there any final thoughts you have on like what's either shifted recently that's been really positive, or something that you think is realistic to shift that could be on the horizon here?
Well, I think in general, I think craft products have been well received. I think consumers, retailers, and the provinces alike support the idea. They support the small businesses, the mom and pops that are doing it. unfortunately, because we're not massive publicly traded corporations that are happy to take $300 million a year losses just to get shelf space, because we actually have to try to make a buck here. It's the pricing compression is difficult. Competing with like super cheap ounces and shit like that is actually impossible mathematically for a craft grower. So like, I think the support and the idea is there. But I think it's been really, really tough for craft growers, like Kip was saying, about breaking people's hearts on a daily. And for those that don't know, Kip and I have a private conversation going on where we keep on hoping to meet up every Friday at 4:20 to have a puff and sort of like lament about the week's, like, you know, difficult challenges and conversations. It is like that because the pricing compression forces us all into a shitty spot in terms of cannabis revenue. But I think a lot of craft growers have had to swallow that pill lately. They're getting there, and as the price of decent craft has come down into reality, we're not going to compete with Redecan, and we're not going to compete with like Hexo's cheap ounces and all that stuff. But if we're in the ballpark price point wise, I think all the other romantic things about craft are resonating with consumers, and I think we're starting to gain momentum overall.
And at the end of the day, there's plenty of people that are willing to pay a little extra for nicer bud. It's like, not everybody that goes into a liquor store is going to buy like a plastic bottle of vodka. You know, there's a lot of people that are willing to spend extra for something that's higher quality. And it's just a matter of like making it accessible and making it having education, I think, for consumers. And, you know, the packaging restrictions and the inability of bud tenders to like really, or actually, can one of you guys speak to like any restrictions that bud tenders have around what they can say around the cannabis that they're suggesting to people?
Not technically supposed to really talk about effects and medical properties. You're not supposed to say this is going to heal this, or it's going to make you feel better, or it's going to make you feel a certain way. You're not really supposed to, you know, say those type of things to a consumer. Okay. You talk about what you can, THC, terpene value, how it was grown, what the flavors are like, what the aromas are like, what the bunch texture is like, yada, yada. But generally, you're not supposed to say how it's going to make you feel.
Okay. Cool, guys. I got one last kind of topic I want to talk about before we switch over to the questions, which is, given all the challenges that exist in this recreational supply chain, what do you guys think about medical sales, and has that become part of your business model at all? If so, like, do you think that is a viable alternative for craft growers? I'd love to hear any thoughts you guys generally have around that whole federal medical sales license side of the equation.
Well, obviously, we have Shelter Market, you know, one of the larger medical programs out there. What I love about that program is that I don't have to go to a provincial board. I get to choose what goes on it, and that is incredible. It gives a small guy a national audience, specifically to patients as well, which is some of the hardest consumers you'll ever have to try to please on a daily basis. And they keep our feet to the fire, and I love it. It's we're responsible for their medicine, and they should. And I'm here for it all day. So I love that fact that's kind of, I don't want to say it's not a loophole. It's just the way that the actual system is set up, that I can get 2 or 3 kilograms from a small producer that he wouldn't be able to get, or she wouldn't be able to get into a recreational supply chain because it's a small batch, or they just are having troubles in general. And then we can put it up on the markets, you know, within a couple of weeks, and bam, national access from sea to shining sea. No matter what province you're in, you can get access to that small producer's flower. And so I think it's an incredible thing. But the taxation, again, I'm sorry, I'm a broken record, but taxing medicine is criminal, to be quite frank, and it's insane. So I had to get that out there.
Sorry, I just was dealing with getting Ben back on here because he's lost his internet connection. Did you say that the medicine is being taxed today, or it's not being? Of
course
taxed?
It is. It's excise. It's $1 a gram. And
they're doing excise tax for medical cannabis.
Absolutely.
Same way they do for recreational.
Exactly.
Are you serious? I had no idea.
Yeah. No, it's a tax on top of a tax on top of a tax on top of a tax.
What?
For the people that are using it for medicine. It's quite heartwarming.
You can write off a portion of it on your tax return at the end of the year, so there is some little bit of kickbacks, but like remittance. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like I can see that. I can see the Yankees doing something like that. But I mean, in the Canadian system where we've got, healthcare as part of what we pay taxes into. I mean, that covers our healthcare system.
Yeah.
Well, why not cannabis? You've already told us it's a federally mandated medicine. So why are you taxing it?
Yeah. Ben, I know you lost internet there for a bit. Welcome back. Do you have any thoughts on medical sales and that whole avenue as an alternative to recreational?
Not really. I know Shelter obviously is super preferred out on that platform. I think they've got, from my understanding, probably one of the best platforms in the country. So I think I don't have a lot of experience with it. We're actually looking at doing some collaborative stuff with them. And well, yeah, I think we'll let them. They're the pros at that one.
Great. All right, guys. Well, with all that being said, let's get into the questions here. Thanks to everybody who asked questions. And I love all the interaction today. We've had so much engagement. Thank you all for being engaged here. Over 50 of you have been here this entire time. So we'll go with the first question asked by Kootenay Aeroponics, is Chuck Morrison, actually. What's the best way to help micros with all the added expenses like beaming and gamma radiating when it costs us $2,500 just to get a single gram in the door? And while you guys answer that, I'm going to go run and take a leak because I've drank too much tea and need to pee. I'll be back.
Ben, this is your guy.
Yeah, hey, Chuck and Lori there. I'm glad you guys are watching. So we work with Kootenay Aeroponics. Great people, great product. They've been out in the market last couple months here in the BCLDB. And it's a good question because like one of the big differences I would assume for a craft grower is coming from the traditional market is there's all these other expenses that they don't otherwise have or aren't used to in terms of compliance software or logistics or obviously testing and then beaming and all these other things. So I guess like there's not really a great way around it. It's like running any other business. I think you need to sit down, sharpen your pencil, shop around for, a lab that is going to test reasonably, these sorts of things. Like always keep a sharp pencil, control your expenses, a dollar saved is a dollar earned, all that stuff. And then also try to anticipate some of these things in terms of like maybe you can get a batch to market without having to run 2 different C of A's if you're clever, or maybe if you've got a buddy going down to do the e-beaming, you can throw on his load and not have to do it yourself. There's like little shortcuts you could probably take to knock a few bucks off here or there, so it's not quite so egregious in the end. But I do understand that it's a pretty heavy departure from what people are used to. And in order to run a sustainable business that's in the black, you're gonna have to control your expenses best you can.
Thanks for that, Ben. I pretend that I was there for that whole answer, and it was marvelous. All right. Next up, we got Paul Hackmai from Hash Guild. Hey, Paul, nice to see you here. And congrats on recently getting your license. They're doing solventless extracts out of Ontario. So if anybody wants to sell their product, if anybody's got fresh frozen cannabis, I know they're looking for some. They're a microprocessor out there. Anyway, with that plug for you there, Paul, let's ask your question here. Any experience with exporting craft cannabis outside of Canada, for example, Europe? Are there any micros that have access to global markets, and how does that compare to domestic market?
Not for me. We're a small outfit and we're very step by step. So we're still trying to figure out the Rubik's Cube of selling weed in Canada. Although, yeah, down the road that sounds like a great fantasy. Maybe in a couple of years we'll get ready for that. But yeah, I think we've got our work cut out for us, anyways. For now,
yeah, it's hard enough just getting into your home province, let alone over in Germany, for Christ's sakes.
Right.
I think in the long run, there's a play there to happen, especially, and I hate to say this for like anybody who's not from BC, but especially for BC Bud, because it already is a globally known brand, and if we are able to get our shit together and get the Ministry of Agriculture in BC and a few other ministries that actually are really supportive of this idea of making it easy to export cannabis. I think there can be like a really great thing done in like 2 or 3 years to help like double, triple, quadruple the profit margins that local farmers in BC have. And that's a thing I'm really keen on working on. I've been having lots of conversations with the BC government over the past couple of years about ideas related to that, but far away. It's not anywhere on the horizon yet.
Sammy, be careful what you ask for, though. Does that mean that is it gonna open up Canada to having importing cannabis? Because if that's the case, we're all done. Mexico, the States, are you kidding me? They'd flatten this market in 10 seconds. So
in terms, do you think they'd also flatten it in terms of high quality craft cannabis, or are you just talking about like? Of
course, you've been down to Oregon, been down to Washington, been down to NorCal, SoCal. They grow great weed down there, absolutely. Yeah. And they don't have half of the restrictions and the oversight that we do. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, that one. Are we going to expand the export? Well, if we're expanding export, I mean that country is like, well, we're letting you in 10 years when their market matures, and then, we let you guys sell all that weed into our country. Now we want to sell back to you, and we say no. It doesn't go that way.
Yeah, I agree. That's a super scary double-edged sword. I love the 400 million Americans clamoring for BC weed, but then the alternative of that is scary for sure. There's some pretty big built-out companies down there that would smash us,
that are already slowly creeping into the Canadian market anyways. So, I mean, careful what you ask for.
Interesting point. I hadn't considered it at all. And technically importing is already possible. It's just that there's only 2 countries in the world that have fully legalized cannabis. I don't know if we can import from anywhere other than Uruguay right now.
Well, and we're the cheapest in the world legalized cannabis. We are the cheapest than anywhere on the planet right now, and that needs to be thought
in terms of
too.
The price that consumers are paying.
Absolutely. Because what's the one big thing we all just learned about Canadian cannabis? That generally they want it cheap, they want high THC, and they want it cheap, and that's all they want. There's like 7% of the overall market that cares about craft, cares about higher for pricing and quality, and that's about it. And so you've got 200 small micros banging on for that 7% of the market. Like people have to be realistic about this, about what's going on in the market.
All right, let's go to the next question from Nathan French here. What about the new rules of the BCLDB? How if you don't sell a certain amount right away, it gets sent back? Can anybody here speak to that?
The evil RTV.
Yeah, the RTV, which stands to Return to Vendor. The program is not I don't think intended to be malicious, because a lot of people were abusing the system with bringing in, overloading the DC, bringing in products and then not actually fulfilling what the potency was. There's a lot
when you say DC, do you mean distribution center? Is that
distribution center? Sorry, distribution center, the LDB DC distribution center. So there was a lot of things that were happening that were there'd be a big producer coming in and overloading the warehouse, and then Shelter and joint ventures couldn't get SKUs registered because they're over skewed. So that was an issue for us. However, if a product doesn't sell well, the LDB can send it back whenever they kind of want, essentially. And if that model was played very fairly based on when it arrived, the volume it was there, the packed on date, how many retailers bought it, then the system can make sense. Unfortunately, it's been not the fairest of systems. And we've seen some small producers that, selling a product to the LDB, the Liquor Distribution Board, and then having to return it in 3 months, that can destroy a micro cultivator's business. So that really needs to be taken into consideration when these provincial boards are looking at RTVs.
So right now, sorry, Abyan, just to clarify there. So right now, let's say we have a producer that had a small scale producer that had 40 or 30 kilograms go through to the BCLDB, and we had like an Aurora type company that had like 4,000 kilos go through the BCLDB. Are they treated identically where like in 3 months, if anything's still in the market, you're getting it back? Is that how it works right now?
I can't speak for some of the bigger companies of how it's working from them, but from what I've seen of, talking to other producers out there and other sales managers out there, of understanding like, okay, you're getting that back. It's only been on the shelf for 3 weeks. Well, we know that this product's been on the shelf for 9 weeks. But why is that one not coming back instead? So we've kind of seen some holes here of where it's not being fair. I don't know how many RTVs these big companies are getting, but yeah, you're right. They have hundreds of thousands of units in the warehouse. And then, like Ben said, Joe Blow has 50 cases in there, and then he might be up for sending an RTV sooner. Like, that's not really fair. Like, The return to vendor system can work. It just needs to be very fair and based on some, tight metrics that make sense. So what that's done for us as processors is just being very mindful of what we load in. So we need to be very confident that our sales are going to be there. And as soon as we see something, because now we actually get visibility in the provinces of what's actually available on a weekly basis. As soon as we see something not doing well, we do whatever we can to get that through, because RTVs can crush our partners and us. Make it very, very hard. So if something's not moving quick enough, we do a new marketing campaign. We do a pop-up in stores. We go extra hard towards that SKU and just try and drive more attention to it.
So it sounds like the world of distribution is very much 2 steps forward, 1 step back on a consistent basis.
Well, the really important salient point to understand here is that, like, once you sell it to the province, it ain't sold, right? Like, somebody at the OCS told me a while back, like, and I quote, like, we don't invest in inventory. So, like, they're not stroking checks until it's sold, or within the case of like Alberta and BC and stuff, they will stroke you a check, but if they RTV it, or if they need to do a price reduction on it, that's going to come back a couple months later and bite you in the ass if you don't have that sales velocity. So, like, that's one thing that craft growers might not understand, is that even though you get a PO and you fulfill the PO and you might even get a check 30 days later, it's not technically sold because it can come back and bite you. So to Abyan's point, we got to be extremely careful, because those kind of expenses can sink a ship. The solution to that is things like direct distribution that we talked about, or a flow through where, like, we're selling direct to retailers, so it is sold. There is no potential that it comes back on you unless there's some other issue. So that direct model is, I love big POs and stuff, but in terms of risk mitigation, the direct to retail is definitely the way to go. And I'm hoping and expecting that after the next couple of years, with Ontario doing their flow through and BC going direct, maybe Alberta will follow suit, and eventually the whole country will be sort of quite a bit more direct and quite a bit less risk on the books. And and also too, like Abyan also said, like, the other way that BC has gone about protecting against that is smaller POs. So rather than ordering 400 or 500 cases of something and crossing your fingers, they'll start you off with like a 50 or 100 case PO, and then if it sells through, they'll give you another one. And we like that. We like low risk. So that's something that BC in particular has done. It helps. But yeah, they're looking for SKU slots, and if your shit isn't performing, you're out the door.
Awesome. For those of you in the audience, just a reminder that as soon as this podcast ends, it'll restart in about a minute. So you can, if you missed the beginning, you can check that out. And it'll also go live on YouTube probably later today. We usually do it the same day, but it might be on Monday or Tuesday. So with that being said, let's go on to Dwayne Jones, who asks, are you experiencing when selling that you are able to sell smaller amounts, 5 kilograms, 10 kilograms, 15 kilograms? What's your experience with that as you're trying to sell it to provinces?
Abby, what's the smallest pack we've sold into a province?
We've sold like an 8 or 9 kilogram pack into a province before, so we have done it.
When you say package, I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. Are you talking about a group of cases that collectively amount to 9 kilograms? Is that what you mean?
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So generally for a 3.5 gram SKU nowadays, you don't do anything bigger than 12 units per case. That's kind of the industry standard at this point. Just for overall, retailers not having to buy 24 units or 36 units at a time, and shipping costs too. A lot of the craft models are still using glass jars. So shipping 24 glass jars it's expensive, and the retailers have to pay for that shipping cost. So being very mindful of those things for sure. So yeah, we have loaded in like 50, 60 kilogram or 50, 60 case packs, and then not kind of then changed out the flavor. We have done it in the past, but it is starting to kind of go away now. Some of our micro partners that are getting the larger yields and bigger volumes, we're really starting to see them have more success, because the province, when they get good sales, they want to come back and buy that right away. And that has been a challenge for us and for Ben and joint ventures there for our craft and micro partners, is being able to keep up with demands. You work really, really hard to get your SKU listed. You work really, really hard to get your SKU sold through the DC distribution center into the retailers. And then they want more of it. And then you're like, well, it's an agricultural product, man. It takes 6 weeks to grow, and then the cure time and packaging. They're like, well, we want it tomorrow. What are we supposed to do now? You registered the SKU. You got to meet that demand. You're like, well, it's a micro. They can only grow this much. They only have, 2,000 square feet. They've only got 1, 2, 3 rooms, whatever it may be. So we're trying to, it's again, double-edged sword. Two step forward, 1 step back.
And is it the kind of thing, Abyan, where let's say you're in a situation, let's say, Kootenay's Finest put out the Jelly Sickle. I don't know if it's sold out, but I'm going to assume it did because it's Sunfarm, they know what they're doing. And immediately, they're like, oh, we want more. Like, is it the kind of thing where 6, 12 weeks later, whatever it is, when the next batch comes through, are they still like ready to buy a whole bunch right away, or is it because the momentum is gone now you got to go through like the hard work again to get that product into the door?
Luckily, we have been, things have worked out where that PO is essentially still there for us when we come back 6, 8 weeks later, whenever it may be. But it's always a bit of stress. I hear this term a lot, this is a good problem to have. You have the sales, not the product, but like it's a lot of stress on me.
Not if it's stressful.
It's exactly. I have the provincial boards emailing me and calling me, and then retailers are hitting us on Instagram and on Twitter and sending us emails and phone calls like, "Hey, when can we get this product back in? When can we get it back in?" Like the window of opportunity is quite small because there is so many other products coming in, whether they be micros or craft. They could be, a big producer from another province that's claiming it's craft, and people think that it is that way too. So like the window is small. We've been quite lucky over the last 12 months to have that PO always be there. I don't know how long that opportunity is going to work there. So we need to really work with our partners. And what I'm really trying to do right now, and it's really the biggest pain point at the OCS based on the way that they're doing their ordering system. I'm trying to work with them to give them forecasts of when the product will be harvested. So say, hey, here's the list of micro craft SKUs you have, and these are when they're going to be harvested. These are the amounts we're going to get. What do you want? So we can start doing allocations and figuring out where it's going. And me and one of Ben's partners at Joint Ventures have been working on that together, actually, to try and sit down with the OCS demand team and be like, guys, this is how the micro program works. And you need to be transparent with us of what your volumes need to be. And we'll be transparent with you of what we can actually get to you.
But what happens, Ab, when we actually get that crop come in and it comes in 2 points less than the range we thought it was going to, because it's a crop and shit happens.
And when you say 2 points, you're talking about 2 THC percentage points less.
Yeah.
Ontario has been better than the other provinces in regards to potency falling a bit lower. But yeah, if you've got a listing at 24% THC and it comes in at 18, don't expect to get an order. So that's the other side of things too, right? They're looking for unicorn.
Sad. It's just so sad because if the THC went down, guess what? The other cannabinoids, the terpenes, probably went up. Like it's like THC. My understanding from I was at the Unicorn Cup that Rosebud Cannabis Farms held a month or two ago,
nice.
And one of the things we learned there was that THC is actually a stress response to the plant, and it usually comes at the expense of other cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids, and. No, we've already talked about this. I'm not going to go down that. I'm not going to go down there. Ben, anything to add to what Abyan and Kip have been saying?
No, not really. I agree.
Okay, so the last question I have, that's kind of a flipping of Dwayne's question here. For you guys as processors, let's say there's a craft cannabis producer approaching you. They want to sell to you, and let's just assume their product is fire. It'll sell. It's the kind of thing that you're down to carry. Is there like a lower limit to how much you're willing to buy of a given batch of cannabis coming from them?
Yeah. So I guess it's another way of asking the minimum batch size, minimum lot size. I mean, we're on the smaller side. We're on the smaller end of things. We'll take in, I don't know, even like 5 kgs type of thing. If we can get a SKU listed and get it out there, we could move it through. I guess to add on to the previous comment, like I think with smaller batch sizes and really scarce volume like that, as long as you're communicative with the provincial boards and are like, listen, we've got 5 or 10 kilos of this, we're going to bang it through, and then we're not going to have any for like another 3 months. So they can exit that SKU, make room in their assortment, which they love, and then come back to them at a later date and go, hey, remember when we sold all that stuff? It went really well. We're going to try it again. And just rather than like having these like dead horse SKUs like just sitting in the way. So I think if you're flexible and communicative, then you can get smaller amounts to market. And I think us in particular, that was one of our claims to fame, especially in the early days, is like we don't have big minimum limits. So smaller guys with little 6 and 10 light shows can still conceivably get to market.
Is that a comparable for you guys at Shelter, or do you guys do things a bit different when it comes to like a minimum size?
It kind of varies.
And if you don't want to talk about it, that's okay too. I don't want to put you on the spot.
It's vendor dependent. It's what time of year is it? What provinces are doing what buying? What is it? What cultivar is it? What do the numbers say? It really is vendor dependent.
Yeah. And I imagine the direct delivery program next year that BC has and any comparable things in other provinces are going to make a massive difference in the ability to have even just like a one time. We're just going to try this breed once because we feel like it. Came out at 15% THC, 6% CBG. Oh my God, I've never had a high CBG flower before. Let's bring this to our retail store because we're excited to like promote this. And then if a retailer is excited about that concept, then they can just buy it, even if it's just 2 or 3 kilos, and you don't have to worry about going through all the charades and whatnot that
dude, for every reason, the direct model is a life changer for some of that stuff you just touched on. I mean, in terms of like taking small batch and going through all the rigmarole to get a SKU registered and all that fucking around, if you just need to add it on the direct platform and without all that background work, if you have a 12% whatever that you're so proud of and you think people are going to want it and you think stores are going to buy it and you want to pound the pavement and make that happen, rock and roll, because there's no gatekeeping, there's no data analytics that the government employees are going to look at and go, this will never sell. If you want to price it at $50 an eighth and you just will not listen to me, then fine. Put it up for $50 an eighth, and if it sells, then you're right and I'm wrong, and I'd be happy if that happened. So, like for all those reasons, the direct model is going to be really exciting. Yeah.
Cool. So to people in the audience, we have lots of questions. So I'm going to ask you guys to go through and upvote ones that you like. So we'll do 3 more questions with the time that we have here. And help me out here. I'm gonna ask a question by JD because it's the first one. Where did it go? Great. It was. It got uploaded as I was just said I was going to do it. But yeah, go upload the rest so that I know what you guys most want to hear. JD asks, a lot of micro cultivators are hoping their processors in centralized locations can sell farm gate for them to amplify their sales. What do you think about the initial suggestions to exclude their where did it go? There it is. To exclude their processors and any topical and edible products from Farmgate?
I think the government listened to the wrong people. Simply put, when those suggestions came out, there was one small, very vocal group that wasn't actually involved on a daily basis in actually dealing with small micros into the recreational market, and they listened to them. And it's ridiculous because how else can the commercial?
I don't think that's finalized because my conversation with the Cannabis Secretariat's office was that they were very much heading towards allowing that stuff, not disallowing it.
We'll see. And if that's the case, because the initial conversations coming out were that they weren't going to allow processors to do the direct delivery model. And that's what we heard when those initial conversations.
Oh, this person's talking about Farmgate, not about direct delivery. So
I'm sorry. Okay.
No worries. Does that change your response at all, Kip?
Not really. Processors should have a farm gate. It should be allowed a farm gate, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with that, especially when it's a processor that's like you guys are prime examples. You guys are just supporting craft growers. Like, why not have a store that's just the brands you guys carry and support? Like, you guys are a critical part of their success. And
I have an opinion about this.
Yeah.
Farmgate is a giant waste of time. And anybody that believes any craft grower that believes that it's going to be a tool that's going to improve their revenue and everything else is sadly mistaken. And as far as even being a processor and having a handful of SKUs and liking the idea of like building a little storefront and people can come in and pay full real retail price for this and I make more margin. That ain't really fair because the guy right across the road from me went through all the licensing and everything else, and he's got a full catalog of like all kinds of different producers, and he gives his consumers a full retail experience with a whole bunch of choice and everything else. I'm not really interested in competing with that guy. I just want to stay in my lane. And as far as Farmgate in general, just imagine you're in the lemonade business, man. Are you going to set up a lemonade stand at the end of your driveway hoping somebody comes by a couple times a day and throws you a few quarters? Are you going to get into every Loblaws and Safeway and fucking Costco across the country because you're working with a processor that has a nationwide distribution model? Where are you going to make more money? The Farmgate thing was a giant waste of time, and anybody that believes differently, I think, is sadly mistaken.
It's a vanity. It's a straight up vanity play. You're absolutely right.
So you don't think there's any possibility of because where I see Farmgate really having the potential for success is with a can of tourism type of thing, where people like I want to go on a week-long tour of the Kootenays. I want to visit all these different farms and try all this different cannabis, buy a whole bunch of stuff from what I like. Like
I'm sorry to interrupt, but like I don't know what kind of dope growers that you know, but the guys that I know didn't want to have any guests. They live in the middle of nowhere. They're not hosting. They're not having weddings on the weekend. They don't have a restaurant where they want to cater to people. They want to grow dope in peace and get fucking paid for it. That's it. That's all. I don't see it having a lot of similarities to the wine industry in BC. I think it's two different sets of people.
And you can only sell your own dope. You can't sell everybody else's. So you're hampered from the guy across the street from you, Ben, who can sell everybody else's dope, right?
Yeah, what consumer wants to buy the same eighth over and over and over again? My mom wouldn't want to do that. No, they want a retail experience and a variety of things to buy. Like I think that's a major problem with that model.
Staffing, insurance, security. Like, I mean, you're whining. They're already screaming at us that they're not getting enough money for their grass. Well, you're going to put a farm gate up? I mean, you know how much less you're going to make by staffing that and building it out? Like, it's insane.
Yeah.
To your point there, Sammy, about the Canada.
Go ahead, Deb.
To Sammy's point there of the Canada tourists and stuff, like I would love to see more craft corners or like locally produced type things in stores there. So like in Salmon Arm, you could have a shelf of everything that was grown in Salmon Arm in a 25-kilometer radius. You're seeing that in Saskatchewan. There's a few retailers there because they can work direct with producers that they're doing these craft corners and having these little shelf cases set up of exactly what, this is where this came from, this region or what that is. And for Canada tourism, that is what would make sense. But yeah, like Ben and Kip said, Farmgate is just, it's not really going to help anyone.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, instead of that, we could do something that kind of like Quebec, where they just basically tell you right to your face, like, if you ain't growing Quebec, you ain't coming in. Yeah. Like, I mean, they have a very protectionist sort of view about getting their local growers, supported in their own home province. And I love that. Particularly with BC and its like tradition and reputation. And I think, to be fair, I think the LDB has done great lately with what they're working with to make that happen in a roundabout way. They're not quite as blatant as upfront as Quebec is, but they're doing their best to promote BC produced stuff. But yeah, man, like that would be a way that they could they could ensure more success from the local growers, is to just shut everybody else out.
Yeah, cool. BC only in BC.
I had no idea that Quebec didn't buy. So you guys can't sell into Quebec at all?
Yeah, there's just a couple things you can work around, but generally they really just want stuff either processed or grown in Quebec. Nova Scotia, same sort of thing as well. They only want stuff from the Maritime region. PEI, very similar. It's kind of how it goes right now.
Cool. All right, second to last question. This one's by Cholo Burns. And please, audience, go upvote whatever else you want, because there's only one more question after this one. So Cholo asks, or she states first, Cholo from Kootenay Cultivar here. We're building a micro now near Salmo. And she asks, I'm wondering, or she or he, I'm actually not sure. I don't know whatever it is they ask. I'm wondering how many micros you will eventually be able to take on as clients. Will there be a point when your business is full and won't be able to take new micros on? Thanks.
That's more for you, Ben. You work with a pile of vendors.
Yeah, that's a tough one, man. Like, I guess I have this wild fantasy of having hundreds and hundreds of micro growers and SKUs all across the country, but it's tough to do. Like I said earlier in the introductions, like we try to follow a little bit in the footsteps of what Shelter's doing with this business model, and doing what they've done, getting the SKUs into the amount of markets that they've done is not easy. It takes a lot of time. It's very difficult. And so to emulate that, and then to you know talk about dozens and dozens and dozens of SKUs as more micros come to market, it's yeah, I'd like that, but it's tough. We'll see where it goes. If I get what I want, which is all the big box guys to fall flat on their face and all the craft guys to have success and sell more and more weed in more and more markets, then we'll have a big vacuum in the market, and these craft guys can fill it, and other guys can get out of town. I hope that happens, but it's got its challenges. We all need to be at the right price point. We need to do the right marketing. We need to be growing fucking super gear. Like, don't get involved in this if you're not, a real pro at this. And I think if that continues, it'll displace some of the bigger guys, and more and more craft guys can get to market. And I would love to rep them for sure.
Great. All right, final question of the morning. I was about to say evening, and I realized this is not evening right now. But if you're watching in Europe, it might be evening. Let's scroll down. Where is the next most upvoted question? Tim Dayton. Hey, Tim. Nice to see you here. Tim asks, I saw a QR code on a package recently. Has this now been approved? Do you guys know anything about that?
I think I sent that to you, didn't I, Abyan?
I
didn't see it. I think it's by Quest. Yeah. As far as I know, that you can't use QR codes, but if that's new and that's changed, then that's happened. But I still don't think you're allowed to use QR codes.
Yeah, we're doing QR codes.
You are?
Yeah.
Good work.
So I had a call.
How does that work?
I love it.
I had a call with Health Canada going back a few months, and to ask this question, and the response was that as long as it's informational and not promotional, so if it's just a matter of like trying to share, the full C of A or things of that nature, it's okay, like non-officially, because it's not in the regs. But if you're just like, creating a commercial out of it or something, they would have more of a problem with that. So it's a kind of a gray area.
But it has to do with enticement, right, Ben? Like you can't.
Yeah.
Okay. So it can't be.
Yeah. So you gotta tread carefully there. But I mean, like going back to our conversation half an hour ago about marketing restrictions and stuff, like we try to do, push the boundaries in any way we can. That's, still realistically within the bounds of the intention of the law without, fucking around too much.
The regulations on packaging can be really taken with a grain of salt, and it's, you can use technology to identify a thing on a package if it's not for counterfeiting, and you can say that could be for counterfeiting, right? So the interpretation of the regulations can be taken in so many different directions. And
you need a lawyer just to get a bloody package out the door.
It's crazy. So I love that you guys are doing that, Ben. I saw that the other day.
Yeah,
and it's
good for you, brother.
It's
That's
a good
awesome.
push, and super stoked to see that come to the market.
Great. So thanks everybody for being here. Ben, Abyan, Kip, do you guys have any final thoughts or comments you want to share? Anything?
Go support your local craft producer. Go in at the local store. Ask what is their local craft offerings. Try to get more information about it. We could all have lip service, guys, but I mean, the only thing that's going to support this industry is your dollars. So please go out and support your local guys. Try different flavors and engage with your local managers and bud tenders and help support craft.
Stop asking for high THC.
Yeah, man. And like, the only way we're gonna like be successful against the big box guys is working together. So that means, on a personal level, on a grower to grower level, like, share information, help each other out. Like I say, we work closely with Shelter, just sharing ideas and stuff because, they're like-minded in terms of their business model. So like the only way we're going to take down the huge guys, or at least claw some market share, is by working together.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for being here. This has been episode 15. I can't believe we're at 15 fucking episodes. That's fucking amazing. This is like a vision that we were just like, there's nothing that's just educational and just let's just talk about how things are actually going in the craft cannabis industry. That's where this came from. And I'm stoked to get to have conversations like this every other week. Next time we're skipping 2 weeks from now because of I think it's Veterans Day. Is that what's happening then? So we're doing the next one in 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks. We got why is it Gnome Star dude? Why is his name not coming to my mind? Earl Oliver, Dr. Earl Oliver from Gnome Star is joining us to talk about his experience, and he's had a wild journey in this world of cannabis. I can tell you that much. So that'll be pretty exciting. He's a very, very knowledgeable human being. No longer, you're right, Nathan, no longer North Star. That's a big part of his his wild journey, and I've been privy to hear a lot of that. For those of you who are checking this out on YouTube, we'd appreciate it if you'd like to subscribe to our video and channel. It's becoming fluid. I'm doing this naturally now. It took a while to learn to have a shout out to the YouTubers amongst you. Ben, Abyan, Kip, thank you guys so much for being here. It's been an amazing conversation. I know I've learned a bunch, and I'm seeing all the people in the comments are agreeing. And for those of you who did miss the beginning and want to check it out, as soon as we hit end event here, the video will process and it'll be available immediately to rewatch if you want to see some of it. Thank you guys very much. This has been the State of Craft episode 15, and see you next time.